The coveted number one hit. It's the top of the summit that every artist desires, whether they admit it or not. I'm not saying that they're all riding for number one, but every artist I've interviewed who's topped the charts is very proud of that achievement. And of course, the record labels, they live for this. What about the Bridesmaids, though? The Rung just below the Close But No Cigar, the number two. Today, I'm counting down the 10 greatest number two hits from my favorite decade to start off with, the 80s, with artist commentary. It's coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you've ever recorded songs off the radio and just hoping, praying that the DJ wouldn't talk over the beginning or the end, then this is your channel, Nostalgia All the Time. Just subscribe below by hitting the red button and check the box. You always know we're got our new stuff coming out. We also have a Patreon that you're going to want to check out. We have exclusive video content there, and we have merch below. Okay, so in the 80s, there were 94 songs that climbed all the way to the number two position on the Billboard Hot 100. That is without getting that coveted number one spot. About 5 months ago, I did a live stream talking about number two hits. And over the last few months, as I've gone over some interviews and I've listened to all the songs that peaked at number two in the 80s, I've revisited this and I've figured out my definitive top 10 picks. And I have to tell you, it's really tough. The 80s were so jam-packed with hits. Pulling 10 number two hits out of 94 proved nearly impossible. But after listening and pondering, scratching, crawling, clawing, I think I got pretty close. So there'll be 10 honorable mentions. And I'm also going to include artist commentary to give us even more insight. So let's get right into it. Coming in at number 10, it is a group that over a 4-year period from 80 to 83, they had as many top 5 hits as any act in the history of music, including the Beatles, who actually inspired them to become a group in the first place. It's Air Supply with Making Love Out of Nothing at All.
Making love out of nothing at all.
Now, Air Supply had an amazing 8 top 5 hits in a 3.5-year period. You think about that. They had Lost in Love, All Out of Love, the number one hit, The One That You Love. And this Jim Steinman creation that should have been a number one hit. Speaking of Jim Steinman, the late maestro actually had the number one and number two hit at the same time. This is when Making Love was kept out of the number one spot. It was kept out by another track that he wrote and produced, Total Eclipse of the Heart, sung by Bonnie Tyler.
A total eclipse of the heart.
Making Love Out of Nothing at All, that peaked at number 2 on October 8th, 1983, my dad's birthday. Stayed there for 3 weeks. Here's what Air Supply co-leads Graham Russell and Russell Hitchcock told me about this period of success.
We said, wouldn't it be great if we had a hit song in Australia and we could get, maybe do a couple of albums and stick around for 3 or 4 years. Now it's 42 years and counting, and it's because of and I said this before in the interview, it's because of the songs.
Most grateful for being here right now after 42 years.
All right, so for my first honorable mention, I'm going to have to go with Journey's own Open Arms. It's hard to believe, but this is the closest that Journey ever got to number one. They never had a number one hit. I know, right? So it makes sense. Apparently, Steve Perry was the only one who really kind of liked this song. Neil Schon hated it. Jonathan Cain, who wrote it, he was kind of second-guessing himself. I didn't really like this song either, to be honest with you, for most of my life. But I have to admit, I had a change of heart when I heard it on Cobra Kai in that scene. It was the third single from Escape. It was the band's highest charting single, like I said, and it helped launch that album's sales into the stratosphere. Coming in at number 9, I'm not going to beat around the bush. It is Def Leppard with Pour Some Sugar on Me. Now, this song has a lot of naysayers because it's been played so much. But you know what? I go back to that teenager that heard this album for the first time and was blown away, and I just have to say it should have been a number one hit, and I had to pick it. This band went through hell and high water to get their biggest selling blockbuster, Hysteria, finished. mean, after a horrific car accident that took their drummer's arm, almost took his life, and a rotating cast of producers, it took 3 solid years to complete. But in hindsight, the band overcame it all. Def Leppard kicked out 6 top 20 singles from this album. Pour Some Sugar on Me peaked on July 23rd, 1988. Spent a solitary week at number 2. Was held at bay by Richard Marx's Hold On to the Nights. Now, Pour Some Sugar on Me was the song that really hooked America on the album. You got to remember that Women, the first single out, didn't do well on the charts. They struggled a little bit, but this is the one that turned things around for Hysteria. It helped it to top the charts and sell over 20 million units worldwide. It wasn't their biggest hit, of course. Love Bites went to number 1 later. But this was so big. This is what Joe Elliott told me about why Hysteria was so huge.
Songs.
Yeah.
End of story. It's all songs. It's just songs. It really is. It's all about the songs.
Okay, for my next honorable mention, it's Hands to Heaven by Breathe.
I need your sweet caress. Hold me.
Breathe is an English sophistopop band that was formed in London in 1984. And though they had some other hit singles in the late 80s and early 90s, Hands to Heaven was their biggest hit, the one they're known by, and it can be found on their 1987 album, All That Jazz. Great album, 3 huge hits on that one. In fact, there were 3 top 10 hits. I want to do an interview on this band and really go into this in depth. Stayed at number 2 for 2 weeks in 1988. It's an emotional song that still holds up. Gosh, I remember buying Breathe, All That Jazz at the record store. Such a good album. For number 8, it's a song that in just about any other week in the 80s would have been a number 1 hit. Had one of the best singers of the decade. It's Foreigner with Waiting for a Girl Like You. It's kept out of the top spot by Olivia Newton-John's Physical. Hall & Oates, I Can't Go For That, No Can Do. Waiting for a Girl Like You peaked on November 28th, 1981, and it stayed there for 10 weeks. 10 weeks. That is a record for the rock and roll era. This song is deeply atmospheric. Thomas Dolby played the keys. It was one of Lou Graham's most heart-wrenching vocals. The song was inspired by guitarist Mick Jones's wife. Basically, it's how he came to realize that she was everything that he ever wanted. Now, while Foreigner's blockbuster album 4's first single, Urgent, was still in the top 10, Waiting for a Girl Like You debuted at number 42, and 7 weeks later, it rose to number 2. I thought it would jump in the number 1 slot for at least a week, especially when Olivia Newton-John fell out of the top spot. But Hall & Oates made sure that didn't happen. Speaking of Hall & Oates, I've got their song Say It Isn't So as my next honorable mention. Written by Daryl Hall during the pair's supporting tour for H2O. It was the first of 2 new songs that were recorded during the sessions for 1983's For Rock and Soul Part 1. The second was, of course, Adult Education. This is what John Oates said about it.
Daryl and I have a very unique way of doing background vocals. People have always commented over the years, musicians and songwriters and people that I work with always say, man, I love your background vocals. I love your background vocals. It's just a thing, it's a Philadelphia thing. It's a certain way of singing.
Okay, as we arrive at the number 7 position, I do want to recognize our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, the rock star choice for glasses. You want to feel like a rock star? I'm telling you, Zenni is the only way to go. Go to Zenni.com. You can choose your color, your shape, your style, and you can also put some things on the side, like I got Professor of Rock here on the side. You can put things on the inside as well. Check it out at Zenni.com. All right, so coming in at the number 7 slot, it's the first single from one of the biggest blockbuster albums of the 80s. It was one of only 3 albums in history to have 7 top 10 hits. It's Dancing in the Dark by Bruce Springsteen. I gotta tell you, I remember rooting for the boss to take this to number 1. I was only 8 years old. I listened every week to Casey's American Top 40, and I was just willing it to reach number 1. And sadly, I was disappointed every single time. Dancing in the Dark peaked at number 2 on June 30th, 1984. What a summer. Stayed there for 4 weeks. It was so close, but the combined efforts of Duran Duran's The Reflex, Prince's When Doves Cry, kept Bruce on the outside looking in. Dancing in the Dark, of course, came from Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA, one of the first albums that I bought with my own allowance. And not a weak track on the album, one of the best ever. Like I said, 7 top 10 hits. No wonder I was hooked. It was actually the last song written for the album, though. It's a whole other story. Let me know if you want to do a deep dive into this one. And then, of course, I got to give a shout out to the iconic music video with future Family Ties and Friends star Courtney Cox dancing together there. The next honorable mention goes to Tina Turner's We Don't Need Another Hero, Thunderdome. Came from the soundtrack of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. And this song was released in 1985. It was on the heels of Turner's 1984 multi-platinum album, Private Dancer, one of the biggest comebacks ever. It has a no-holds-barred saxophone solo by Lost Boys alum Tim Capello. It's great. Tina wailed on this song. This is one that I really wanted to go to number 1 as well. I love Tina Turner. All right, coming in at number 6, it's the band that never dies, whose guitarist might be older than the Constitution. It's Start Me Up by the Rolling Stones. The 2 songs that kept it out of number 1 were Arthur's Theme, Best That You Can Do by Christoper Cross. And yet another Hall & Oates entry, Private Eyes. Now, by this time, the Stones were entering their 3rd straight decade of hits, and at this point, they'd already had 18 top 10s in the 60s and the 70s, and that includes 8 number 1s. Mick Jagger referred to the song as a forgotten track. In fact, it was sort of a reject. Apparently, Start Me Up took on a reggae vibe after about 2 takes. And according to Keith Richards, they recorded something like 70 takes of this song because they were convinced that playing it reggae was the way to go. I guess somewhere in the middle, they took a break and they did a rock version, and eventually that's the one that landed on the album Tattoo You a few years later, and it became one of their biggest hits ever. So my next honorable mention is Nena's 99 Luftballons. I guess to a lot of people in the US, Germany's Nena is a one-hit wonder. You know, sometimes referred to as the balloon chick. We just did a full piece on this. Kind of sacrilege to call her a one-hit wonder. She's had like 50 plus hits in Germany and Europe, all over the place. She's amazing. 99 Luftballons, as catchy as it is, it's really a masterful anthem speaking out against Cold War paranoia. It's the ultimate pop song contradiction. A lighthearted ditty with a heavyweight message that just encourages you to dance in the face of your fears. If you want to see the rest, the whole story, I'll link to it below. Okay, so we're halfway through at number 5, and it's a song that we previously covered in depth on this channel. In fact, there are a few other songs as well in the top 5 that we've dug into, but I digress. For the 5 spot, It's Purple Rain by Prince and the Revolution. Purple Rain peaked on November 17th of 84, and it stayed at number 2 for 2 weeks. It was locked out at number 1 by Wake Me Up Before You Go by Wham. And Duran Duran's A View to a Kill. I always say it, 1984, the most sensational year in music history, no doubt. Now, when Prince was composing Purple Rain, he drew inspiration from a few other songs in that particular era. Bob Seger's We've Got Tonight.
We've got tonight. Who needs tomorrow?
Gary Newman's I Die, You Die. And Journey's Faithfully. Became the song that I think Prince is most associated with because of his underlying passion in this amazing song. And of course, for my honorable mention here, I got to go with another one of my favorite Prince songs, Raspberry Beret. It was the first single to be released off of Around the World in a Day. The first record released on Prince's own imprint, Paisley Parker Records. It was definitely a departure after Purple Rain, that blockbuster year of 84, and intentionally so. Instead of the funky guitar work, the album had a quiet, almost psychedelic feel. And this one should have been a number 1 hit. We're going to cover that one in the future. So moving along to number 4, one of my favorite bands ever, a band that Eddie Van Halen has called technically the greatest ever. It's Rosanna by Toto. Rosanna reached its second place peak position on July 3rd of 1982, and it stayed there for 5 weeks. Now, during that time, it couldn't get past the two-headed monster of the Human League's Don't You Want Me? And Eye of the Tiger by Survivor, 2 huge hits that year. Luke's solo on this one is just ferocious. The horns, Bobby Kimball's blurring vocals. I mean, come on, it's a perfect song. So many layers, so many hooks. This is, of course, another song that we've covered in depth, and a lot of people were trying to figure out if it was really about Rosanna Arquette or if it was about somebody else. Here's what the members of Toto told me about that.
It was about another girl. It was my first love.
Steve was dating Rosanna at the time.
Yes, and all of a sudden she came in, and I think everybody anybody who met her had a crush on her, and I was no different. When she walked in and I met her, she was cute and she was gorgeous, and I just needed a title, Meet You All the Way. And I met her, and I remember just adding her name to the song.
Yeah. You got to come to me if you want the real truth.
I love it.
Rosanna we all met her at the same time, especially David and I. He totally wrote it about it. You know what I mean? Like you wrote about a girl that you know what I mean, that you first meet and leaves an impression on you.
Okay, so this next honorable shout out, this was so close to making my top 10. It's What Have I Done to Deserve This by synth pop masters, the Pet Shop Boys, and Dusty Springfield. I love the way that their vocals flow together. Now, Allie Willis, who wrote the song with the Pet Shop Boys, she said the song was about someone in a dysfunctional relationship that they know that they shouldn't be in, but they just don't have the strength to get out of it.
What have I done to deserve this? What have I?
They basically become a slave to obsessive love and smash hits. And smash hits may have said it best. The brilliant thing about the Pet Shop Boys is that they get everything right, and you can't argue with that. Neil Tennant, Chris Lowe, one of the greatest duos ever. Heading into the number 3 slot, seriously, it's a song that on any other day could be my favorite number 2 hit ever. It was a game changer then, it's a game changer now. Don't Dream It's Over by Crowded House.
Hey now, don't dream it's over.
Now, Don't Dream It's Over peaked at number 2 in April of 87. It was only number 2 for 1 week. It was kept out at number 1 by the duet I Knew You Were Waiting For Me by Aretha Franklin and George Michael. And this crowded house classic is easily one of the greatest songs in history. No hyperbole. It's an inspired song that really we need in the world right now more than ever. I was so fortunate to interview Neil Finn about this, truly one of my holy grail interviews. Here's a little part of that.
In order to provide more than just a simple guitar strum, they added a big backbeat. And so there's a...
Yeah.
You know. And that's what the demo was like, you know, when I had just that and a matchbox snare drum.
There is freedom within. There is freedom within.
For my honorable mention here, I want to include John Lennon's Woman. Woman was one of his best solo songs. It was written for his 1980 album Double Fantasy. He chose a track to be the second single released after Just Like Starting Over.
Just like starting over.
It's released on January 12, 1981, and it would be the first Lennon single issued after his tragic murder on December 8, 1980. Okay, at the number 2 position on our number 2 countdown, this was a fight for me. I mean, really, my top 3 on this survey could have all been number 1, depending on a lot of different factors, depending on the day. But today, my bridesmaid choice for number 2 is Tears for Fears with Sowing the Seeds of Love. I love this song. We actually did a full-on deep dive for it not that long ago. It is so good. It's worth talking about again and again. Sowing the Seeds peaked at number 2 on October 28, 1989. I remember that week. It was shut out by Miss You Much by Janet Jackson. I just wanted it to be number 1 for 1 week. I was actually ticked off when I was listening to the survey on the American Top 40 Countdown with Casey Kasem. It actually has the excellence of the Beatles in it. It was meant to be a tip of the hat, but it ends up being a mind-blowing masterpiece. It could have easily been on a mid-period Beatles record. That's not hyperbole. This song is serious sonic ecstasy, a headphone song if there ever was one. First time I heard this at 13, I mean, it scared the hell out of me in the best way possible. There was so much going on in the song. It's just eerie, the background vocals, all the instruments. It's just a throwback to 60s nostalgia with a kind of flower power philosophy. It's cram-packed with so many memorable lyrics. My favorite is, so without love in a promised land, we're fools to the rules of a government plan. Kick out the style, bring back the jam. Kick out the style, bring back the jam. Just brilliant. Okay, we're running out of honorable mentions here, but here's one that I could not overlook. Ride Like the Wind by Christoper Cross with a perfect Michael McDonald background vocal to boot. Ride like the wind. Of course, Michael McDonald was on all the great yacht rock records. In fact, it inspired this hilarious SCTV skit. Such a long way to make it to the border of Mexico. Released in February of 1980, it was held out of the top spot for 4 consecutive weeks by Blondie's Call Me. Okay, we're here at the number 1 spot. This survey's number 1 hit, the best number 2 hit of the 80s, for my money, at least today. It's one of the true masterpieces of the rock era. Disintegration. It's Love Song by The Cure. I will always love you, every track on Disintegration is quite flawless. Love Song is no exception. It just barely missed the top spot. Couldn't get past Janet Jackson's Miss You Much. She held Tears for Fears and The Cure both out. I mean, her album Rhythm Nation 1814 had 7 top 5 hits, so. But apparently The Cure knew from the start that Love Song was gonna be a huge hit. And anyone who has ever taken the time to give it a really thoughtful listen can attest that Robert Smith and company were exactly on the money. I mean, I remember listening to this song and album madly and deeply throughout my adolescence. I just talked about it a few weeks ago. It's really hard to convey its impact. It was so different from anything else on the radio at that time, and I was just elated that it went as high as number 2. Famously, Love Song was written by Smith for his fiancée at the time, Mary Poole, as a wedding gift. The Cure frontman said he wasn't trying to be clever in writing. With Love Song, he was just taking him 10 years to reach the point where he really felt comfortable singing such a straightforward love song. He said, in the past, I've always felt a last-minute need to disguise the sentiment. But with this one, what you hear is what you get. And there you have it, the 10 greatest number 2 hits of the 80s. But wait, I've actually got to throw in one last honorable mention. This is one that barely missed my top 10. I got the revving up your engine, shoving into overdrive 1986 Top Gun classic, Danger Zone, by the king of the movie soundtrack, Kenny Loggins. This song had at least 10 different artists tied to it. I mean, at one point, it was Toto, R.E.O. Speedwagon, and Starship. Leave us a comment about any or all of these incredible 80s number 2 hits. What is your top 10 number 2 hits of the 80s? Let us know where did I get it wrong, where did I get it right. If you like this content, be sure to subscribe below so you never miss out on a video. We would love to have you as a part of this community. And until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.